Savos. I'm an author, illustrator, and storyboard artist, and I illustrated and helped write The Girl Who Sang. So I'm going to give you all a quick overview of my background, and then I'll get into how The Girl Who Sang was made. So first, when I was, sorry, this was supposed to be in the last slide. This is some of my work. I do pet commissions, so those are some cats I've done as commissions, and then I have a personal project where I do drawings inside of tiny vintage address books. When I was younger, I was really inspired by comics and animation, and these were some of my favorites, and a lot of them were about animals. And those inspired comics that I made as an elementary schooler, and most of them were about my cats, and pretty much everything I drew was animal related. And so this was about my two cats, one of whom is still alive, and he's 19 years old. As I got older, I read more comics, and I watched more cartoons, and I became inspired by all of these as well. Since I was little, making comics was my favorite thing to do, and my dream was to publish my own. So I went to the School of Visual Arts for comics, and while I was there, I interned at Titmouse Inc., which is an animation studio, and First Second Books, which is a graphic novel publishing house. After graduation, I was hired at Cartoon Network to storyboard on the second season of Close Enough, and then I went to Titmouse to work on Q-Force, and then I went back to Cartoon Network to do Close Enough Season 3, and then I went to Shadow Machine to work on Little Demon. And around the time, as I was first hired at Cartoon Network in 2019, my editor, Makisha Telfer, reached out to me about The Girl Who Sang. So, The Girl Who Sang is a Holocaust memoir told by Estelle Nadel, who was Enya, as that was her given name in Poland. And it's about her and her family's survival during and after World War II. It was co-written by Bethany Strout, and the manuscript I was given was written by Bethany. So from there, Estelle and I collaborated to write additional scenes and make edits, and then I illustrated the book. Makisha found me through the Jewish artist tags on Twitter, where I posted a lot of my art and my own comics. Being Jewish myself and having always wanted to publish a graphic novel, this was like so perfect. It was so perfect to be paired up with Estelle. I had always wanted to do a Jewish story, and doing one as important as this one felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because there aren't many Holocaust survivors as there once were. And some of my own family comes from a town not far from Estelle's hometown of Bork, so that alone felt like an immediate connection. Here is a photo of Estelle from this past November, and another photo from the 90s of Estelle, who her given name is Enya. Her older brother Mel, whose given name was Menashe, her older brother Steve, whose given name was Shia, and her cousin Mala, and I don't think Mala changed her name. Mala, Steve, and Mel passed away before work on The Girl Who Sang started, so I never had the chance to meet them, but I was able to collaborate with Estelle for all of it, which was a really amazing experience. But taking on a book that takes place long before I was born and set in a place I've never been, and is a story as personal and important as this one, was really daunting. And I wanted to get it right. I wanted what Estelle read on the page to feel like home and to feel like her family. So in order to get it right, I had to interview Estelle a few times, and I had to ask questions throughout the whole process. And I asked her things like what the walls and floors of her house were made out of, or how her family members showed love or sadness. A lot of intimate things that she was always willing to answer. And unfortunately, Estelle passed away this past November, and that's been really hard. I feel like I had a really good connection with her, and we really understood each other. I knew a lot of intimate things about her life, and I wanted to get to know the current day Estelle better than I do. And I also really wish that we could be doing events like this together, but I'm grateful at least that she was able to hold the finished book in her hands and tell me how happy she was with it. It was really important to Estelle that her story be told so that people know what happened to her and her family and others during the Holocaust. And soon we won't have firsthand accounts anymore. And unfortunately, these stories are still relevant today for Jewish people and for anyone who has or is now living under systemic oppression or violence. For me, when I say never again as a Jew, I mean that for Jews and all people. I want to be part of that teaching and truth-telling, and I'm hoping that this book will help teach a new generation about anti-Semitism, oppression, and help raise them with empathy for other people. As for the process, the journey of this book started with character design. So I'm going to show some of my character designs. These were the designs that we settled on for Estelle's immediate family. So I have my laser pointer. This is Enya, who is Estelle, her older brother Shia, older brother Menashe, her mother, who is called Mamchu in the book, her older brother Sonia, older sister Sonia, older brother Moshe, and her father, who is called Tate. We ended up changing the style a bit from this, where you can see that everything is drawn with pretty smooth lines and they're colored, but we ended up changing it to be like a crayon-like texture with dark blue and green colors instead. We wanted like a softer, more organic feel. These were some drawings that we did for other family members. This is Tante Hinda, that's her aunt. This is Vuya Weiss, which is her uncle. Estelle's cousin Mala, and these were two cousins that lived with them, and Putlina, who hid them. And I made a bunch of these charts because I needed to have a way to keep track of everyone's heights in relation to each other, and so I had to draw a lot of people next to each other in order to keep that straight. These were the Kurowskis, which was another family that hid them. Mrs. Kurowska, Mr. Kurowski, and their daughter Milja. And this was Estelle in the 80s. I want to put a picture of that in here too. I ended up changing her outfit from this purple sweatshirt to a purple cardigan that she actually owned, and I had like pictures of. But for the Kurowskis, I didn't have any photos of them at all. I only had Estelle's description. So she would give me information like their hair color or their body type. And for them, I based everything off of that. So I had that to work with, but then I would give them some other similarities like their face shape or their stature to like combine them like as a family so they look related. But sometimes I did have photos. So this is a photo of Estelle's cousin Mala, her uncle Vuya Rice, and this is Estelle, who's Enya, and Sonia. And then this is how I stylized everyone. And for Mala, I kept her little dress with the buttons here. So for a lot of them, I tried to use like exactly what I was given whenever I could. Here's Menashe and how I stylized him, and Shia and how I stylized him. And both of those stylizations were also combined with descriptions that Estelle gave me. Her Tante Hinda, and then another photo of Enya here, and Sonia, and these are cousins. These are character designs for her parents and her older brother Moshe. There weren't any photos of them, so I just have to go off of Estelle's descriptions again. And for her dad, she described him as like a taller, thinner Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, but with red hair. So that was my reference for him. These were little tests that I did when we were deciding on what kind of eyes we wanted to use for the style. And we started with these dot eyes, and then I tried two kinds of eyes with upper and lower lids and different colored irises. I don't think you can tell on here, but this one is black and this one is blue. And we didn't end up using any of these. We ended up using this style of eye that's just a top lid. And then these were dress and hair options. And we obviously went with the very first one, didn't even have to do the other ones. But we did end up using this hair for Enya's teenage self later in the book. And then these were different color options. We went with this one for her main dress, but we ended up using the other colors for a lot of different outfits too, because she changes her outfits up until they go into hiding. And this was when we were deciding what we wanted the general style of the whole book to look like. And initially we were thinking of doing it like this comic that I did when I was in school, which was a limited color palette with a very soft crayon pencil texture. We ended up keeping that sort of texture, and you can see here we tested it in blue, but we ended up not liking it as much as full color, so we ended up doing full color instead, which I think was a really good choice because I think for a lot of stories that happened during a time when all of the photography and video was in black and white, it makes them more relatable and puts them into the current time a little bit better. It's easy to say like, oh, this took place so long ago, it's not really relevant anymore. So I think that making it full color helps bring it into the present a bit better. So now for reference and research. Once the style was set, I got down to research for clothing and backgrounds. I used as much photo reference that is still provided as I could, and for everything else, I either found a reference myself or I made an educated guess. And so here I had a picture of Enya and her older sister Sonia wearing these matching dresses, and in the book, Sonia makes these dresses for the two of them, and so this was the photo that I referenced. I don't know what the color of the dresses actually were, so I went with like this creamy color dress with little red polka dots, and Estelle seemed happy with that. Here I used this photo of two Jewish children, and I decided to use the little girl's dress for Enya's dress because I thought it was really cute. And then I had a lot of other photos that I used for general reference for like jackets and boots and dresses and things like that. For the soldier who offered to take Enya to America, I referenced the 6th AAA Battalion, which was the only battalion that was all black and all female that went to Europe during the time. They were stationed there to sort through around 7 million pieces of mail and packages to boost morale among American soldiers in Europe. I don't know if she was actually part of this battalion, but I think she would have had to have been because this was the only one during the time in Europe. As for the backgrounds, I only got a few photos from Estelle, and this was one of the ones that I got, and so I turned it into a panel. This one was another one that I got from Estelle of her hometown of Org, and so those were like what I used for the basis of her whole town, and then I combined that with using Google Street View and Google Maps to fill in the rest, and then other photos that I found of like rural Poland. For the Jedlich refinery, I used this old stamp. And then for the synagogue, I think that this was an old postcard. For the jail, I used a combination of photos. And this one is an old Polish jail, and this one is a Polish railway station. And so I kind of combined those to render the front of the jail. And then this was a building in Boston that I took pictures of because it was very, very similar to Estelle's description of the jail. And so I took photos so I could get the kind of the perspective that I wanted. And these are more pictures of the same jail. This is the outside of the jail. So I copied that for the outside here, and this is the inside of the jail. And so I used the same shape of the window, and then I also included this bar, so it did feel like the same room. These were photos taken from a trip that Estelle went on with her siblings back to Poland, and so they took a lot of photos and video of their trip back and like of a lot of the places that they had previously been. So this is what the jail looked like in the 90s rather than when they were there as children. This is the displaced persons camp in Austria. This was a photo that I was given, and this was part of a video that Steve's son Norm filmed. That was that trip that they went to Poland, and so I had a lot of reference for this area, which was really helpful. This was a Kurowski's barn in 1945, and I pretty much directly copied it for this panel. So I didn't have photos of the inside of the Kurowski's barn or Padlina's attic where Enya and her family were hidden. Only descriptions. So I made these diagrams to differentiate the two of them in my mind, and to keep it straight. Like, they were both very similar spaces, but I didn't want them to look the same, and I wanted them to look consistent, so I always kept these little diagrams at my desk so that I could make sure that everything was always looking the way it should be. I also made a lot of maps to keep buildings and rooms and neighborhoods organized and figure out where everything was spatially. It wasn't always necessary, like for this one, this is Padlina's neighborhood, and so I got on a call, like a FaceTime with Estelle, so that we could figure out like where all of these buildings were in relation to Padlina's house. And it was a very long call, lots of, do you mean your right or my right kind of thing. And then these were diagrams that I made of Estelle's house, and this one is their room in the displaced persons camp. And so this ended up being a lot to organize, and so I came up with a system. This is the binder. Inside the binder is the full manuscript, notes, edits, reminders, and sometimes I would put thumbnails in there because when I was reading the manuscript, sometimes I would think like, oh, I know exactly how I want this to look, so I would make a little thumbnail to remind myself. I used pink tabs and orange tabs for different purposes as well. And so the pink ones were for any time there was a time skip and I needed to come up with new designs for Enya and her siblings, so they needed to be aged up. And then all of the orange ones were all of the times that the manuscript had to be extended because whatever was written on the manuscript didn't actually fit on a comic page. So you can see here, this was supposed to be page 81, and now it's 103 because of all these different times that it had to be extended to accommodate the information and the action. This was a page that I kept in my planner, which is basically just a reminder for myself to remember all of the brush settings in my art program and the font size and things like that. And then this was another page that I kept in my planner that reminded me when and where as Enya and her family wore regular and religious clothing. And then these are what my papers looked like when I was going through revisions. And there was a lot of that. I also made a lot of calendars. So because like the timeline for a graphic novel is so long, I needed a calendar that was like at least a year and a half out. And so each sticky note would be 1 month. And so I put them on this huge board at my parents' house because this was during COVID, and I ended up getting stuck there for like a year and a half. And so I set up at the dining table, and I had this giant board to create my office cubicle. And eventually this board ended up getting completely filled with other reference stuff and maps and everything. And later on in the process, I remade my calendars and put them in my planner when the schedule started getting tighter. So, yes, with all of my stuff organized, this is how you make a comic page, the way I do it. So first, we start with the manuscript. This is a screenshot of of a Word document explaining what happens on 2 pages. So this is page 58 and page 59. Basically, what happens on these pages is that they're hiding in Podlina's attic. This is Estelle, Shia, Menashe, and their mom. And in the morning, Shia makes a peephole in the thatched roof, and he can see a plum tree outside. So this is him, Shia, whispering to his siblings, "You two come here. If we're careful, we can see outside." This is a little section where we pull out to a cutout of Podlina's house and this large neighborhood, large courtyard. And so as I'm reading, I'm imagining how I want this to look. I'm imagining it like a movie in my head. And so to convey that to a reader with the most clarity and emotion, I split everything up into actions and, I split up all the actions and dialogue into panels. And so I start by making panels with boxes of color. And so all of the yellow boxes are the ones that are in daylight, and then all of the green ones, it's a little hard to see on the screen, but all of the green ones are in shadow. And sometimes they would be blue. It was like whatever I felt like at the time. And so first I would add the text. And here I hand wrote the text, which I'm never gonna do again. But at the time I did that because I hadn't made the font yet. And I made the font with my own handwriting, which took a really long time. So at first I just wrote everything. Then I would sketch out the backgrounds and the characters. And so for the beginning here, the script doesn't initially call for this first panel, which is just of the sky, but I felt that we needed to set the scene. We needed an establishing shot, and then instead of just going right to Shia opening the peephole, I thought it would be a little bit more dramatic to slow it down and show him opening it and show the light on his face, and then have him calling over his siblings. So that lengthened things a little bit. And then here, where we're talking about the cutout of Podlina's house, and then pulling back to show the courtyard and all of the neighborhood, that ended up not fitting on the same page, so I had to put it on the next page, which is page 59. Now it's probably like 70 something, but that didn't fit, and the large courtyard also didn't fit. But I also felt like it didn't make a lot of sense to include the courtyard because Enya couldn't even see the courtyard from where she was. They could only see a small view from the peephole up here. So I kept it very focused on Podlina's house. Because this didn't have space to go over here and it's on this page, I could only fit this amount of text on the page it was supposed to be on. So all of this got moved to page 60. And so that happened a lot of times, and that's why the book was extended. So I end up with the sketched out scene. And so I could do about 6 of these, 6 pages of these a day. After that, I would draw all the panels by hand first. I would trace the colored boxes, and use a hand-drawn line because I thought an organic line for this book would be a little bit better. Which I felt the same way about the handwritten font. I wanted everything to have a very handmade feel because this story is so personal and so human. I thought that having everything felt like it was made by a person would be the right feeling. So after I do the panels, then I put in the text, and then I draw the backgrounds, and then I draw the figures. And I could do, yes, I could ink 4 pages a day. After that's done, I would put in the color, and I would do the color at first like it was in daylight, and after that I would add all of the shadows and the light, and I could usually color between 4 and 5 pages a day, and so that was the last step. And yeah, this is the shadow added, and so that's the basic process for bringing a manuscript to a finished page. You just do that like 200 more times, and then your book is done. So yeah, so making this book has been a really incredible experience. Very long, but very rewarding process. It took 4 years. And I'm really honored that Estelle trusted me with such a sensitive story. In the end, Estelle was triumphant. She survived, she maintained her passion for singing, she married, and she had children and grandchildren, some of whom I've met and I can say are just really lovely, wonderful people, just like she was. So thank you so much for listening. If you want to follow my work and keep up with me, I'm Hamotzi on Instagram, Sammy Savos on Twitter, and Hamotzi on Tumblr. Thank you so much.
We're going to open it up to questions now, so if anyone has any questions for Sammy on anything related to the book or the process, go ahead and raise a hand. And Sammy, you can call.
Okay. Yes.
What part of the book was your favorite to do? Like, what felt the most rewarding to finish in the book?
The most rewarding to finish. There was a scene where this definitely wasn't my favorite one to do, but it was the most rewarding. It was this 2-page spread where Enya and Shia are on the boat to America, and it's like a view from above, and it's packed with hundreds of people. And it took so long, and it was also a view of this boat that I had no reference for. It was a very specific kind of boat, and I just I didn't understand what it was supposed to look like. I remember asking my dad to help me, what do I do for this for this boat? And so I found the reference that I could, and then packed in hundreds of people, and it took forever, but it looked really good in the end. So that was a really rewarding one to finish. But my favorite part to do was actually the scene in when Shia and Enya are in the jail cell. And that one I was actually really looking forward to doing that one since I read the manuscript, because that scene stood out to me a lot, and I knew exactly how I wanted to draw it since the moment I read it. I think that something about it is it's one of the most quiet scenes in the book, but it's also, I think, the scariest. It's the closest that they came to getting caught, and it's very looming doom, so it's very dramatic, and it's very cinematic too. It's something out of a movie. It's it's incredible that they were able to make it out of that situation. And I also really liked their sibling interaction in that scene too, so that one was my favorite. Yeah. Yes.
Could you tell us, I know you mentioned a little bit about the process of interviewing Estelle and how, you changed the manuscript, and I really love the book. It really feels like Estelle's voice. Could you tell us more about kind of the process of where the manuscript was at and interviewing Estelle, and how you decided, what to put in, how to include things that she actually said, or her own voice?
Yeah, so the question is about collaborating with Estelle and changing the manuscript and why I made the changes that I did. So I added a lot of scenes and edited a lot of the second half of the book, particularly where Estelle is dealing with her, she's being adopted, and so she has to be separated from her siblings, and there's a lot of talk about why she's being fostered and why she's being adopted, and she really wants to stay with her siblings, but she's not able to. And then, sorry, I wrote down actually the answer to this question. And so, basically, the main focus of the scenes that I added was closure, not necessarily for the characters in the story, since you don't really get closure in real life all the time, but for the reader. So much of the first half of the book is about Estelle and her fear of losing her family, and so I felt like it was necessary to specify Estelle's feelings throughout the process of adoption and separation from her brothers, and her perception of abandonment by Steve, Shia, and then her forgiveness. Those things weren't really in the story before, and if Estelle feared losing her family and so much of the book is about her and her brothers, then separation from her brothers needed more attention, because that is loss of family in a way. And also, we rarely see what happens after liberation in Holocaust and war stories. Like, often it's not smooth or easy, and so I wanted to add all of her feelings about those things. Like, how did it feel to move to a new country with no family, no parents, you don't really have any support, you can't read or write. It was those things that I felt needed to be added for context, and so it felt that the book was complete. So we really understand how Estelle felt about how her life was changing. Yeah.
What are the most important lessons you're going to take from this process and this book when you do next?
That is a good question. I think as an artist, now I know better what my flow is for making comics, so I don't have to waste time with like figuring out where steps of the process should be. Now I have a very smooth idea of how things should go, like how I explained the sketch ink, the color, all of that. It's a little bit more complicated than that when you're actually doing it. It's like, okay, so when am I doing the text, and should I do that first or should I do that last? Like the text, like, has to be readable, so you have to make sure that it's a good size, and if it's a good size, you have to draw everything around it, because if you can't read it, then there's no point. So now I know like the order everything should be done in, and I understand how I can, like, you know, make a comic in the smoothest way, so I can focus on making it like either, you know, pretty or funny or you know, dramatic, whatever it is I want. I can focus on that instead of like, how do I even make it? Yeah.
Yes. How much say did the editors and Estelle and essentially the other people have over your artistic choices?
I think it was kind of different for different parts of the process. In the beginning, it was really just me and my editor and Estelle. And so, honestly, they gave me like free rein with anything I wanted to do, which was really wonderful. But Estelle obviously had the final say. Whatever she wanted, that would be how it was, and I agreed with that. For my editor, I think it was kind of a mix, but like, we were usually on the same page, so there wasn't really, I don't think there were any times where I was told that I couldn't do this thing I wanted to do, or what I thought wasn't gonna work very well, and, you know, I mean, I definitely had like revisions and stuff, but everything could be a conversation, I'll say that. Everything could be a conversation, and then when I was at the stage where we had like fact checkers and copy editors and other people who I never met and would never speak to weighing in, I would say like a little bit less say, but still, I mean, everyone always listened to my opinion, and so like, I don't know, that was really collaborative. I would say the least amount of control I had was with designing the cover. I would say that. Like, I could only say so much before you know, someone would be like, okay, well, this team or this group of people said that that's not gonna work, so we're gonna do something else, and I'm just saying like, okay. Yeah, so it kind of varied. I would say like, as the process went on, I had less say, if that makes sense. But again, whenever I had any suggestions, like that would always be taken into consideration. Yeah. Yes.
Can you describe the interview process? I mean, obviously Estelle's going to design for your editor and stuff like that, but what was the selection process like, meeting her, going through that before finally you chose?
It was really nerve-wracking. It was really casual. Like, I just had Estelle's phone number, so I would just call her and be like, okay, I have all these questions for you. Are you able to sit down and talk with me? And she always said, she was like, you can call me anytime, you can always talk to me, I'll answer anything you have. So yeah, I would just like go into a quiet room and I would have like my paper of questions to ask her. I would call her and I would ask her the questions and we would talk. And then sometimes like after we were done talking, it would be like, then she'd talk about something else, you know, it would become a little bit more casual. Like, like one of the times we were talking, after we finished interview questions, she was like, so do you have a boyfriend yet? Or like, and then there was another time where we were talking about just like Jewish youth groups, like how we were Jewish, like at home, I guess. Like she was in BBYO, that's a Jewish youth group. And I was like, oh, that wasn't really for me, but I was like, I worked at my synagogue until I graduated high school, and so we would have a lot of really nice, like, normal conversations. Not as many as I wanted, like, it was a lot of times just focused on, like, her childhood and getting to know her and her family through her perspective. But it was really nice that it could be casual, you know, like every time we would hang up the phone, she'd be like, okay, dear, okay, like, bye, call me anytime. So, yeah, it was really nice, even though I was always nervous every time. That's always just been an anxiety of mine, like interviewing people, but she made it really fun. Oh, yes.
Do you know why Estelle chose a graphic novel as the way to tell her story, given that visuals from this time can be a little jarring, but also quite powerful for that? I'm wondering the thought process behind that.
Yeah, the question was why did Estelle choose to tell her story through a graphic novel? Initially, she had said that she didn't even know about graphic novels, like she didn't know that they existed, she didn't know about comics, and when she did know about them, she thought that they were really only like for kids, that you couldn't tell really, what's the word, like you couldn't tell stories like this. But then I think she said she had read Mouse and she was like, oh, I could do this. And I'm trying to remember who it was, but someone had suggested it to her that she should do it in a graphic novel form. And then she was like, oh, okay, I guess I could do that. That's a good idea. So I don't think that it was initially in her mind, but it was suggested to her, and it just all happened to come together that way and be the right option for the way that she wanted to tell her story. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
In terms of designing the characters, do you find it easier or harder to make the characters when there are references for them?
Oh, that's a good question. The question is, do I find it easier or harder to design characters when I'm given a photo of the person, right? I would say that it's easier because I have direct reference of what that person is supposed to look like. It does make it like a little harder to like, you know, use your artistic license, and I guess, I don't know, I would say that it's easier. It's easier for like getting what Estelle wants and for being accurate. It is more limiting than if I was given just a description and I fill in the rest, but for designing them in terms of accuracy, it's much easier. I would say that for designing characters without any reference, there is a certain like enjoyment in being able to use artistic license and, you know, make them the way that I see them in my head. But there's also like anxiety with that, like I don't know what this person looks like, so what if I get it wrong, or what if I draw them in an unflattering way, and like, you know, it's harder in that way. But it's also, it can be more fun, so I would say it's usually easier to have a photo. Yeah.
Of all of the characters, who was the hardest to nail down, get approved, get finalized, like most like one?
Oh, okay. So the question is, who was the most difficult to nail down for our character design, and who was the easiest? I think that Estelle's mom was the most difficult. She probably had the most edits. There was no reference for her, and there wasn't even like, oh, she looks like this person, the way that I had for her dad, who looked like Tevye. For her mom, there was none of that. It was just like, she had this colored hair and this colored skin, and that's it. Like that was literally pretty much it. So we had to go through a couple edits for her, and it was also like, this was her mom. Like I wanted to get her mom right. She had a really special relationship with her mom, and so it felt like there's a bit of pressure to get her mom feeling familiar and right. So I would definitely say that she was the hardest. And then the easiest person, I think Shio was the easiest person to draw, because his description I felt was pretty clear. I had a lot of, you know, I had like his height, his stature, his hair color, his hair type, and I did have photos of him as a younger man, but more as an older man. And one of the things that I did, when he was an older man, he had like white, kind of wavy curly hair and dark, thick eyebrows. And so throughout the book, I slowly made Shia's child self look more like his older self. So like I would make his eyebrows a little thicker as he aged and that kind of thing. So he was definitely the easiest, and I think I had the most fun drawing him. Yeah. Yes.
Which part of the story, or maybe which element, was most important to Estelle? Either the thing that she wanted to talk to you about the most, or even just the part that she wanted to get the most right?
I think that the part that she wanted to get the most right was the scene of her mother's death, because that was the one that I had to spend the most time revising and working on and making more clear. Initially in the story, it wasn't as graphic, I guess. Like it was like kind of off screen, like, oh, she was caught by a group of Polish teenagers and turned into the police, and she was shot. And initially that wasn't on screen, but Estelle was really clear that she wanted it to be shown, like she wanted the violence to be shown. And she called me about it. She was saying, like, I want it to be clear. I don't want that to be vague. I want people to know what happened to her. I agreed with her because I feel like, you know, you can't like sugarcoat what happened to Holocaust victims. And I think a lot of people will say like, oh, but this book is for children, or this thing is for whatever, it's for young people and they can't handle it. But like they can. Most Jewish people as children have grown up with this knowledge and we understand, and like it's fine. Like I think that kids can handle more than some people think that they can. And it's important for anyone to know. Like Estelle told me this story once about how she was teaching a class of teachers about how to teach the Holocaust. And so she was telling her story. She told, you know, everything that's in the book, she was telling these teachers and teaching them how to teach it. And after she told her story, one of the people, this guy, was like, well, don't you think that you might be exaggerating how bad it was because you were so young at the time? Which is like so incredibly like horrible to say to her when her entire family was killed. And you know, other people in the room were really horrified that he said that, and they talked to her afterwards. But like, you know, because of there's people like that out there, and so it's because of those kinds of people that when we're telling our stories about the Holocaust, we have to be clear, we have to be explicit, because there are always going to be people who doubt it. Yeah. Oh yes.
Hi, sorry. I have like a twofold question.
Sure.
Which was, the first part is like, what was it like to develop and use all of these skills? Like, you would become an expert in like fashion, historical fashion, in boats, you know, like things like that. What was it like to develop those skills?
Oh, that was really hard. Like, I'm used to researching for all sorts of things that I had to do in school. So it wasn't necessarily like the most difficult thing to do, but it was a challenge because I didn't know what these things were supposed to look like. And so it was really rewarding when I could find a photo of what I was looking for, and it was from the right time, and it was in color. Like, that was like really rare. But I had a whole folder on my computer that was organized by like location or clothing or soldiers. Like I had a whole like Nazi folder, so I could look at their uniforms. I had weapons. I had all of these things that I'm not used to drawing, and usually don't really like drawing. Like, I don't really have a lot of experience drawing guns or tanks or anything like that. And I can't really even speak to the accuracy of what I put in the book. Like, I'm sure like someone who loves World War II would be like, that's not actually how it looked, but like it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Like, there sometimes like I could get really obsessed with it and be like, oh my god, it has to be exactly, everything has to be perfect. But then I would have to be like more realistic and pull it back and be like, okay, well, that's not the point of the story. You know, it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. Not every single thing has to be perfect. But I think naturally I am pretty detail oriented, so I try to do my very best. Like, there is a scene where Shia is hiding in the Kurowski's attic, and he is writing in a calendar. And I know that he wrote in a calendar because in his verbal testimony, he said that he kept one, which is how he was able to say, oh, this happened on Saturday, oh, this happened on Sunday of this month. But that wasn't in the manuscript, but I wanted to put it in there. But like, I had to think, well, what was he writing with? Like, were ballpoint pens invented? Like, could he even write with a ballpoint pen? So what was he holding? Like, if you were writing that scene, you could just say Shia was Shia was making an entry in his handwritten calendar, and that's fine. But if you're drawing it, you have to draw everything. And so I would look things up like that, and I think that added to the authenticity of the story. And I think that for me it felt pretty good when I could get it right, but there was also like a balance of like, okay, it doesn't have to be that that perfect, you know? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot, I have a second half of the question.
Yeah.
What, if you can say, what do you want to work on next? Like, do you have any ideas or anything? Are you allowed to say that?
Oh yeah, right now I am, because I don't have anything like, you know, officially in the works, but I'm planning to do another graphic novel that I want to write myself and illustrate myself, and I'd like to do a comedic fantasy graphic novel about intimate friendships and the importance of asking questions. Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the similarities and differences between working on a graphic novel as opposed to working as a storyboard artist? Do they inform one another?
Oh, yeah. Okay. The question is about what are the differences between working as a comic artist and working as a storyboard artist. So, as a storyboard artist, you are essentially making blueprints for animators, and in a way, you are kind of like a director, and sometimes you're a character designer. Sometimes you're a prop designer, but it really doesn't have to be that specific because all of your drawings are much more like sketches, and they can be pretty rough. Depending on the show you're working on, sometimes they want you to be very tight with your drawings. Other times you can be really loose and sketch things out. And usually for storyboards, you want to draw panels that show every movement. So like if someone is like they'll pick up a cup, drink it, walk across the room, something like that, you draw all of those actions. You draw them walking, leaning down to get the cup, picking it up, drinking, and walking across the room, you know, in panels, each step. But if I'm drawing a comic, then I skip all of that because I'm not making directions for someone. Anyone can understand that if I have a panel of someone drinking and then walking across the room in 2 panels, that's all you need. So it's less information for actions when you're doing comics, but when you are actually like if you are doing comics, you also have to be more specific in like everything else. So while a storyboard can be pretty sketchy, a comic, like a finished comic, can't be that way. For a storyboard, I could just rough in a little background that shows the perspective and maybe rough out a room. But in a graphic novel, I have to draw the windows, I have to draw the table, the furniture, everything has to be specified. So in some ways, doing a graphic novel can be a lot more intense than doing storyboards. But again, it really depends. Storyboards are a lot of work and they take a long time to make because you have to draw every action. So I'd say those are probably the main differences, but both are sequential, so they're pretty similar and there's a lot of overlap.
We have time for one more question if anyone has one.
Oh, yes.
I know you said you were in the system, so you graduated high school and know a little bit about your Jewish education.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you learned something about the Holocaust doing this, but you haven't gotten all of your public school religious education in a way that helps you communicate to people who maybe aren't into this or don't have the experience with it to help them understand.
Specific to this book.
Like what you learned in the process of making it.
Yeah. I think, I would say I didn't realize how often Jewish people's neighbors would turn them in. Like I think in Hebrew school, like, I obviously knew the basics about the Holocaust and, like, what happened to us, through, like, Nazis' involvement, but I don't think that it was as clear to me how often, people's neighbors and, other, like, you know, Gentiles, community members, would turn Jews in or turn them away and not help them. And I think that that's pretty clear in this book, so I think that that might be a new perspective for some people. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have to cut it there for time, unfortunately. Thank you, Sammy, for answering all those questions and for that presentation. This is We're going to do